joining us. This is an episode of Discharged Unfiltered. Three vets talking about our service, talking about after service, talking about all the things, all the wonderful things that vets can do for the world. And today we've actually chosen to have the discussion of leadership in the conventional versus infantry versus soft forces, and just kind of see where that conversation goes, see what kind of comments we get from the audience, and yeah, we're gonna have a good time. So how's everybody doing?
Oh, here, excited. I wore another Army shirt just for you, JJ.
He wears his shirt because his shirt says Army.
Well, his shirt says airborne, which means it's better.
Yeah, it's not just any airborne unit, the premier United States Army, center of gravity, center of the universe, 82nd Airborne Division.
So if you're not in the military and you're wearing that shirt, does that mean your head's still in the clouds?
No, that means you're
that's stolen valor.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that. That there are certain crimes that you just don't commit, and to that point, talking about soft versus conventional, one of those crimes is you don't wear the stuff for the units you haven't been in.
Yeah.
Fact.
Yeah. That's 100% true. I mean, and that's really interesting too, because some people served in a capacity where they might have fallen under a unit, like 4 or 5 tiers under, but they still have gear from them. And so they didn't technically serve in that unit, but they served in that unit.
That was my favorite, was when you would see somebody wearing an 82nd combat patch way back during the GWAT, and you'd ask them, oh, when were you in the Deuce? Where were you in the Deuce? And then you'd hear, oh, well, we were attached to them whatever years. And you go, okay, well, where were you when you were attached to them? And you drill down and they didn't have the answer, but they were a distant attachment to that unit. So therefore they got to wear the combat patch.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that happened with me, my second deployment. Though I was I was an E6 and a movement control team. E5 and then maybe E6, but in a movement control team, but we were in FOB sites is where our staging area was. Mm-hmm. But first half of the deployment, we fell under the 82nd. Second half of the deployment, we fell under 4th ID. So technically, I have both of those patches because we had to wear them. The first half of the deployment, I wore 82nd. Second half of the deployment, I wore. That's just what they wanted everybody to do. That fell under that.
So that part never bugged me, especially when you're talking Army to Army. What chapped me every now and then was those Army fellows who would be wearing the Marine patch. And usually, to Trevor, what kind of Trevor mentioned earlier, we're not talking like, hey, I was on this FOB and the Marines owned that FOB, and I was, a Marine officer was in charge of me, or I reported to a Marine officer. No, it was usually like 5 tiers down. So it was just like, oh, well, the CG who was in charge of this area was the Marine CG. So therefore, because I was at Kandahar, I get this 3rd Marine Expeditionary. Like, what? Hang on. What?
I actually encountered a scenario like this literally last week. I was picking up some food, and I see a guy walk in, E6, with an SF combat patch. So I asked him, when were you attached to group? Because I knew he wasn't a long tab because he didn't have one on. He had a recruiting patch on. So I did the math really quickly in my head. And then he starts telling me about how he was here, he was there, and he was doing secret missions. I'm going, you're in recruiting command. I don't understand how this works.
The math ain't mathin'.
But to that point, we talk about unit identity and leadership and thinking about it. A lot of I've said this, that when you talk about military units, it's almost like saying what college you went to for a lot of people, because it's no secret, I'm very proud of my time in the 82nd. It's a premier unit. But if you tell me, hey, I was in the 101st, I'm going to pick on you because you're not airborne.
Your air assault, maybe. At best.
Maybe. You just you wear the tab and it's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You sit on a throne of lies.
Exactly.
Sit on a throne
Exactly.
of lies. Well, so you guys were a lot closer. No, man, I'm creaking like I'm a freaking teenager or something like that. No, but you guys were closer to the SOF entities. So I'll let you speak to this first. You know what? Since you guys worked with both SOF and conventional parts of the service on a regular basis, what are some things, Trevor? And I know you have a lot more comments about this, or at least in past conversations, you have some very specific things that you wanted to bring up. But what are some key differences that you guys have seen, leadership styles, all the things between SOF and conventional?
Well, I'll start with the thing that we were always told in the 82nd. They told us we were triple volunteers because we joined the Army, we joined the Airborne, and then we joined the infantry. And I know people who retired out of the Special Forces community, Green Berets, and one of the things that the themes that you keep hearing as you go up in those tiers is you fall in line as fast as humanly possible because you don't want to be kicked out.
Mm.
Like the higher up you go and the more elite you go, I don't want to say, it's from what I've been told, it's not fear of losing out, but it's you have to adapt faster and more in line with what everybody's doing because the pool is so much smaller and the margin for error is so much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Their politics, I will say, their politics is a lot different. Now, caveat, right? I wasn't in SF.
Neither was I.
Worked with them many times. You know, I was close with them. We've supported them in missions, but you know, I myself was not. But kind of just as an outside observer, working with them, talking with them, you tend to see their politics are a lot different, and that's not necessarily good or bad, but that's what creates the difference. And I will say this though, one thing I do love and appreciate about the SF units, everyone I've worked with, is they are very, very, very specialized at the basics. And I don't think a lot of people give them enough credit for that because that is what they drone in, day out. So you look at conventional Army, infantry, scout, doesn't matter, logistics, you learn the basics, you do your, you know, warrior tasks and battle drills, but then you're focused on the bigger things and all these broader pictures. As for those guys are really, really focused in. And actually, I really saw it a lot with the SEALs. I didn't realize until one of my deployments that the SEAL teams actually kind of differed in their specialties.
Yes.
Could they do all the things? Yes. But those teams really were defined in like, hey, this team is specialized in room clearing and these operations. This team is definitely specialized in amphibious. And it was really cool to see. So I think starting at that kind of changes the leadership perspective right away.
Well, can you elaborate on that, John? Just, you said it changes the leadership perspective right away. So what do you mean by that? What does that specifically mean?
So when you look at, right, the experience with the big Army, right, we're kind of this encompassing leader. So we're in charge of our people, we're in charge of the mission, we're in charge of the commander's intent, right? And we're supporting all these elements. As for them, you know, I had in my biggest scout platoon 32 Muldoons, not counting the training we know in basic and stuff, but 32 is my average size. My 82nd platoon was 18 Muldoons, right? But when you're talking, I'm dealing with that many people as a section leader or platoon sergeant, it changes the dynamic. I have to depend on my team leaders more. I have to depend on my squad leaders more versus, you know, watching these SF guys on the smaller level, they're in like teams of 8. So they're a smaller group that they're coordinating with, and they're focused on them, right? They know what the mission is, and they're just left to their own devices, get out there and go, and very, very little oversight. So it gives them more autonomy to do things because it's a higher level of trust. Not to say we're not trusted, but it's a higher level because the margin of error is so much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing to think about too is when we all were deployed and task forces or SF groups or whoever they would enter our battle space, they assumed control. They almost assumed control of us while they were in our battle space as QRF units, as sometimes as security elements. You know, it's a really weird dynamic sometimes when you start talking about some of these groups and specialized teams that come through battle spaces, because they'll come through as a team, and then they'll say, hey, can you support us if we need it? Can you give us this if we need it? And they just bounce from area to area looking for their targets, relying on the resources of the bigger army if they don't have their own, if they don't have rangers with them. But it was almost like they would come in, take over our talk for 12 hours, and then leave. And it was just assumed, and sometimes most of the time we would get a heads up, but it was just assumed that, yes, this is cool. And we would stand down for the night while they were there.
That's interesting.
And actually I've seen the opposite perspective of that too. One of my deployments up in the Diyala province is just kind of on normal patrols. One of our sister platoons found this huge cache. Well, after running it through intel and this and that, turns out to be this training facility that the Jaysh Mahdi was kind of using. Just so happened to be on one of the Ranger units HVTs, right? So the intel did their thing, figured this out. So the Rangers said, hey, we're going to come in and take this out. And so it became, hey, my platoon ended up being the cordon for this. So they asked, hey, we need 2 cordon platoons. My platoon was one of them. And so we did this cordon for them so they can go in and get it. Things got a little dicey, so they ended up calling a detachment team in there to help out. So they'd come in to help out the Rangers. And they never, on the flip side of what Trevor said, they never took over our talk, but in reality, they took over the entire battle space.
But that's what I meant.
Became their priority.
That's what I meant by they took over our talk. Like they never had somebody stationed in our talk, but they took over our battle space when they were there.
Yeah.
And it was clearly stated, we stand down unless we are asked to do something, because they took their mission took priority over anything we were doing.
Sure.
But it was cool to see how our findings was impacting their mission. Because, we usually hear, oh, they come in and it's whatever, but also to see that they do rely on the big army, the conventional army, for those other tasks. Sometimes it's purposeful. Sometimes it's like, dude, that was just a great target of opportunity. You found something we were looking for. Perfect. Let's go.
I know of this happening, and I'm going to be very vague in my terminology because I don't know how much of it is public knowledge. But there was a point where I've heard the stories firsthand from people who were there, so I can tell this semi-intelligently. And SF scout team was observing a particular site. And then all of a sudden, I think they were compromised. So they had to call in the immediate QRF of anybody nearby. And strikers came in, other support came in. CAS was coming, everything was going crazy. And it was all because they were there, they needed support, they wound up in a tick, and it was whoever was nearby. They didn't care what unit it was or who it was, just as conventional forces in that aspect. And we forget that while these teams are very specialized and do these tasks, they still have access to everything that we have when we're out on patrol too, if not more, because when they get into a tick, it's because they're looking at something that probably shouldn't be there to start with. Whereas most of us just stumble upon something and we're like, oh, hey,
this is cool.
So I didn't actually run into any of the special forces or special operations units downrange, because I dealt specifically usually with infantry, not with the Marines and the Army and stuff like that, because, well, maybe a little bit with 160th, my third deployment, just because we had a helipad and we supported their missions too, because I was in an aviation brigade. But for the most part, it was really interesting to know that the crossover and the way this applies to the way service members think in the civilian world. How many jobs have you been in since you've been out of the military, John? You've really only had one, and then you have your own business. So I don't know, that maybe jobs, since you've been out of the military. But
it's not a job, it's an adventure.
It is. That's all an adventure. But how many have you guys been a part of where if somebody from another organization comes into your organization and asks for your help, they'll either get it or they won't, as opposed to when we were in the military, somebody from an outside organization, even if it's a separate service, they come into your area and they request your support. It's not even really a question. You make a phone call, hey, the SEALs are over here, or hey, we have 160th over here, or hey, whatever the case may be. It's not even a question. It's really just kind of an FYI. There is support. If you're wearing a uniform, we got your back. And
to piggyback off that, though, it wasn't just special operations. It would be conventional too.
of course, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what the background for that organization is. If they come into your area and they need support, pretty much consider it done. Now, if you're in the Army and you're requesting airlift, there's a significant amount of money that gets transferred from the Army to the Air Force, or if you're transporting stuff through the Navy, the same way. There's still some money transfer and stuff like that. But when you're in a combat zone, most of that stuff just goes out the door. And so think of, I challenge the people who are listening to this to kind of think of what that means when you bring a service member that may not be fully qualified into your organization, but this is the way they think. Mm-hmm. How much of an asset could somebody like that be to your organization?
I would challenge that and also say, how much of a detriment could they be because they think like that too?
That's true.
Because if that's what you're used to, is the mentality of, hey, I need something, everybody comes over and tackles it for me. That doesn't work. That doesn't fly in the corporate world all the time. Maybe you'll get one person to come and help you if you really need it, but you're in a way, in the corporate sector is the closest example to what an SF team type of operation does, because you're on your own. You might have a few people to your left and right that can help you with something, but very, very often you can go ask people, but you're not going to get mass support for your initiatives unless you've got a lot of executive backing.
And maybe weeks and weeks and weeks of waiting for somebody to sign something.
Exactly.
Your issue is not my emergency. But actually, I do want to give an honorable shout out, because at least in the combat zones, almost the reverse is true with aviation. I loved aviation because sometimes they would just show up in your battle space and they would just check and they'd be like, hey, we're flying through your battle space. This is how much time we have on station. If you guys need anything, we're flying through. Here's our route. Mm-hmm. And so you knew just these guys are flying through. So if anything were to happen within the next however long they said they have before they got to get to where they're going, you had additional support that wasn't there as part of the op order or the mission brief or unexpected. Now, to Trevor's point, or to start with JJ, to your point, what does that look like in a civilian organization? That's kind of cool. Someone comes in, hey man, I can help you out, this, that. But what's the reverse and detriment to that is, well, if I'm already out there just giving away my time and helping people, it's either A, I don't have a real job, and this is corporate sector, or B, that I'm so underutilized that I think I know your job better than you do. And it can look very bad, even if that's not the intent.
That's true.
The other thing I was going to say, the other thing to think about too is, as you start bouncing around, it goes back to what we talked about last week about saying yes. If you start going around saying, hey, I'm here to help, eventually you lose your job because you're the one that's always being pulled in 10 directions to go help everybody else, and your work suffers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same could be said when you're on active duty. I mean, there's a certain point where, and actually, John, you brought this up last month when we had our call, the Discharged Unfiltered call. If you're given your left and right limitations, which is what we need as veterans, because otherwise we're gonna charge that hill and we're gonna keep on pushing and pushing and pushing until the mission is accomplished. But if we're given our limitations, hey, if this happens, you do this. And with the example that we're using right now, that could be, hey, if somebody from this organization comes over here and they need help with this is what you do to get them that help. And if it's this or this, then you have to defer them to somebody else and blah, 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 this, that, and the other. So if we set those expectations right up front, if we do what we're supposed to do, and we actually have an SOP that tells us what to do when these situations come up, because you already know that you can tell. I could tell Trevor something today, but tomorrow he's not going to remember what the heck I said. I mean, that's just kind of how that's just how stuff works. So black and white.
Sorry, were you talking?
Exactly. Documentation beats conversation every day of the week. So, I mean, if you're laying it out and you give the information, but then you have it in black and white that they can reference, whether it's in a shared file or an actual physical book sitting next to that person's desk or whatever the case may be, then the likelihood that they're just going to go, well, for lack of a better way of saying it, balls to the wall, get her done sort of a thing, to make sure that they're doing the stuff that they got to do and they're not going too far, then they won't. And then if they do go too far, likely what's going to happen is they're going to get written up, and then they're going to, I mean, you smack their wrist a little bit and then they're not going to do it again.
You put on that performance improvement plan.
And
PIP. That's right.
I want to talk about something though, because we started off with the difference between SOF and conventional.
Yes.
You know, I don't hide the fact that I'm probably the only person that quit the prep course for selection, because I came in as an 18 X-ray, which meant I came off the street, went to a prep course for SF selection, and I realized very quickly I am navigationally challenged, to say the least, and half of selection is land nav. So what I did was I made it through the prep course. I saw by the end of week 1, I was like, there is no way I'm passing this. And the cadre, they're trying to filter people out before you even get to selection and say it's not for everybody. And part of that is tongue in cheek, and part of that is true. It's meant to be that way.
Yeah.
So I made it to the part where land nav was the key. And then I was like, yeah, I'm out, because it's just not going to work. And I've actually talked with a friend of mine about this, who was cadre at SWIC, which is the Command for Special Forces Training. And he said one of the things that they do is when they're watching candidates, they're saying, is this somebody I would want on my team? Because every single person that goes through those courses, if they pass, they have potential when those cadre go back to the teams. You could run into that same person on your team, and you know that you were responsible for letting them through.
So knowing what, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, so that works actually in both sides of the field, right? So first I'm going to speak on the big side. When I was a drill sergeant, right? I pushed hundreds and hundreds of privates in my 2.5 years on the trail. What are the likelihood I'm going to see these guys? Because there's hundreds and hundreds of privates, right? Well, lo and behold, I end up at the 82nd, and boom, there's four of my soldiers who then see me, and they're freaked out because, oh my goodness, drill sergeant, though I'm no longer wearing the round and brown, they freak out, and it's like, oh man, I put these Muldoons in or got them through. But on the flip side, right? Speaking of Trevor, so Trevor outstid. I went to SFAS twice. So the first time I was a non-select. So I went through everything, got my grade, and then came the day when they said, all right, we're gonna, if you made it, you go over here. If you didn't make it, you come see us. We're gonna talk to you. So they called names. I was on the you didn't make it list. So they came in, they kind of talked to me. They said, hey, I was young. I was a fresh sergeant, only had worn the rank for about 8 months coming off a deployment. So I felt like I was Superman, right? So they're just like, hey, you're young. We think you have a lot of potential, but we kind of want to see more out of you. So I get home, recover, get to the next class, come back, go back through selection. This time I did get selected. So I make it into Q course. Wasn't there 3 weeks before I was peered out. Right. And to Trevor's point, it's because it is not for everyone. I was young, just thought I was Superman and all this. And what crushed me, and rightfully so, was I went there with a bad attitude and the wrong attitude. Because one of the things they grade you on is, how do you let the leaders lead, whether you agree with them or not? And how are you functioning as a whole team dynamic, right? And I had this thing where, like, you're doing it wrong and this and that, and I tried to take over, and they told me, like, when I was peered out, they're like, this is why you have the wrong attitude. Like, this is not what we need in people. So I was still invited to come back and try it again, but it was kind of my awakening that, you know what, maybe that's not the right path for me. And, I never went back after that, but it was a big learning lesson.
And to your point about that, when I was at WLC, which is the new version of PLDC, I was a senior E5. I was about to pin on 6, so I had to get that done. Deployment cycle, everything else, it never got done. And when I went there, they were like, everyone is a sergeant. So here I am with an 82nd combat patch and a CIB, and I'm working at the airborne school. So the lone maroon beret in the formation, and I'm just letting the game play. I'm just watching it. I'm like, I've seen this game long enough. I'm good. And they're calling everybody sergeants, all the E4s. And I remember this clear as day. It was like the last day we were doing cleanup. Somebody else was in charge. So I was just like, hey, you do you, bro. I'm just going to be over here sweeping. And I don't know what happened, but somebody was running their mouth at me. And there was a room full of people. And I just looked around and I said, clear the room. Everybody looked at me and I said, clear the room with the authoritative NCO voice. Everybody leaves. And I was like, not you two stay. Because they were specialists. And I proceeded to just rip them a new one in the room privately about how you can be called a sergeant, but you are not a sergeant. You are not a leader. You are not an NCO. You are not I'm letting you be in charge right now because that's the way this game is played, but don't think that's weakness. And I just proceeded to completely tear into these two E4s like 2 days before I was supposed to finish WLC. And I was waiting for them to go tattle and tell cadre and the cadre to come to me. And I would say, well, I was playing the game, but there's a certain level of respect that you get from wearing the stripes versus not wearing the stripes. And I live here. I'm permanent party at Fort Benning. They are just visiting. So let's not get this twisted that, that going back to the politics game, that plays a part too.
Well, let's think about this for a second, though, because in that environment, you're all supposed to be equals, and it doesn't matter if somebody's an E4, E5, or E6. It's not supposed to matter. But at the end of the day, if you're doing your job with the rank that you were given, with your pay grade, then if they're doing something that could be detrimental to their future role, you actually do still have a responsibility to do exactly what you did, pull them off to the side privately and have that conversation. That's a basic leadership thing. You don't criticize publicly, you do it in private. And you did it exactly the right way. And you did it in a way that didn't shame either of them. They might have felt a little bit of shame.
We won't go that far.
I was going to say they might have felt a little bit of shame, like they got more than just a slap on the wrist. But at the end of the day, they're going to remember that. And they're going to take that into whatever future role that they have. And hopefully they're not arrogant and stupid at their next role, because honestly, that's one of the biggest hurdles in the military, whether it's, I'm sure, I don't know, probably not in SOF at all for this one, but because you get crushed pretty quick, I'm sure. And I can't speak to that because I never served in that environment. But whether you're infantry or your logistics or whatever the case may be in the conventional forces, it's expected that you have a certain type of professionalism about yourself. And if you don't, I mean, especially when you're brand new to your leadership role, maybe you're a corporal or an E5, you will definitely eventually have somebody come up to you and say, if you want to act like you're not a leader, I'd be happy to give that position back to you.
Well, and one of the things that I made sure of was during this verbal teardown, I explained to them what it means to be I used that time to explain to them leading is more than just rank.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people don't understand that in the military. And that's part of how they fail when they get out is they're so used to rank is absolute, rank is the boss. And I had this conversation with someone a couple weeks ago about, he was like, you must have been so much better when you got out into corporate America because, you had that authority. I was like, no, it was so much better in the military because you wore your rank on your chest. You wore your authority on your chest. And when you butted heads with someone of equal rank, it was a butt heads and walk away, usually, because time and grade is irrelevant when you're arguing with someone. But if you outrank them, and that is absolute. There is no negotiation about that.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And that's not,
what?
Go ahead,
JJ.
Well, I was just going to say that is one of the the things in the conventional army that kind of sets people up in a way when they get out of the military that it's not really fantastic. I mean, they learn the right leadership stuff and everything else, but unless you know what somebody's role is when you go into that next job, you almost have to treat just everybody as if they're an equal or whatever, because when you're in the military, you wear your rank. Trevor's right, but you don't wear your rank. You might have an office if you're lucky when you go into the civilian world. Otherwise, you might be, if you go into corporate America, you could end up in cubicle hell, or you know, if you work in construction, you're just going to be another person on the team until you earn your way to the right place. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but it's so much different. You have to learn the rank structure and what that means. And sometimes, even if you're in a leadership position in the civilian world, you don't necessarily have the type of authority that you had when you were in the military. It's completely different. And so it's kind of fuzzy that way. You have to establish yourself as a person who cares, rather than, hey, I'm an E5, you're an E4. You know, you better stand at parade rest when you're talking to me. And if you don't, I'm going to put it on paper.
Well, I think to say, because I agree with you, JJ, and the problem is you could tell the people who are leaders, because it's like natural to them and they have that emotional intelligence to them to understand what it means to lead and to lead people and how people operate, right? Versus you get some leaders that are just, they are rank driven, right? Not necessarily for the paycheck, but they're rank driven, they're power driven. And those are the ones who wore their rank heavy in the military. And you see, they are the ones who have the hardest time transitioning out. And I'm going to attack a lot of lieutenant colonels, and sergeant majors on this, because they are usually the worst about it, because they're, well, I am this, so therefore I should no, because you're in a new industry. This is a new ballgame. Mm-hmm. Sure. Have you been in charge of these things? Absolutely. Does that count? Yes. Is it in this industry? No, you're starting over. So you have to have a little humility and come back. But that plays into that leadership style you had in the military. There is a time and a place that you needed to wear the rank. And there was also a time and a place that you could be a little more like, all right, hey, this is kind of more of a learning moment, and let's figure this out as people, not necessarily as, you know, NCO to subordinate or officer to subordinate, or any kind of combination in between, right? Because there's plenty of times I've had bump heads with people of higher rank than me, of lower rank than me, of equal rank than me, but it's that level of professionalism and that ability to sort of say, hey, where's the hard line, and when do we need to walk that line? And going back to the SOF unit, yes, their politics are very strict, but I think they also do a better job at that emotional level leadership.
Well, I think that once you volunteer to go into those types of units, I don't think they necessarily specifically groom you to be following along with the politics and everything, but you're definitely read in, so to speak, in how the teams are run, how things are done throughout the training pipeline, so that by the time you get to a team, if you're humble when you walk in the door and acknowledge, I don't know anything, they embrace you. Mm-hmm. And to JJ's point about the difference in corporate America, I was at an event a couple weeks ago and I was talking with someone at the table, and I was like, oh, you know, what do you do? And I said, I was a project manager. She's like, I've never met a project manager before, which that was a whole nother conversation. But I asked her what she did, and she was like, oh, I'm just the office person at this construction company or industrial steel company. And I was like, just the office person? Do you understand what you just said? You are my best friend as a project manager, because you can tell me who to go talk to when I need something. And you probably know all the executive assistants, which means now you can tell me, hey, Steve's in a good mood. Go break the bad news to him right now, as opposed to if he's on the warpath and I've got to go break bad news to him. You know who the engineers are that can do math quickly and good versus the engineers that barely pass calculus, and we don't trust them to do much of anything. You know, and I explained all this to her, and she was like, never thought about my job like that. Because
everyone has a place that they fit.
Well, mm-hmm. And John knows this as a PM. Those are the people you go buy them lunch, you go buy them beers, you buy them whatever you need to keep them happy, because when you need something, you go to them. It's just like the supply person in the military. You know, you make sure that you find the people that can square you away, and you take care of them regardless of the job title, because they have resources, which is more valuable than job titles.
Oh, well, that's any job, to be honest with you. If
But-
you are at the very bottom, if you start over again and you get out of the military and you start over again at the very bottom, that should be the one thing that you should take from your military service that benefits you no matter where you go. Because I mean, gosh, when I was an NCO, I did that.
I did that. I started over at ground zero.
Oh yeah, me too. I worked at Lowe's.
Yeah, I was working for $8 an hour at the Auburn Student Athlete Library.
But I mean, just think of it that way. I mean, when you're an NCO, I mean, you're part of a club. So you go to any NCO, hey man, I'm jacked up. You figure out who's the ones you can rely on, who the ones you can't rely on, and then you build you don't say it out loud, but you build your team inside your head. You know, this is the person I go to for this. This is the person I go to for that. If I really need to make some stuff happen, all I got to do is pick up the phone to this guy. He's kind of a jerk, but he makes stuff happen. So, I mean, you have those people, but if you start back from scratch, even if you're at the bottom, how fast will you move up if you're that guy that it can go and learn everybody's capabilities, even from the ground level, and be able to utilize those people and make stuff happen? If you're the person that they go to because I don't know what's going on here, but I told John to go do this, and before I knew it, everybody knew what was going on and stuff was just happening.
If I told John to do something, I wouldn't expect it to be done.
Well, that's just because it's you, Trevor.
Never ask me anything. I'm walking away.
That's why you haven't responded to my texts.
Oh, I was like, cool story, bro.
You mean, which one of those memes are you talking about?
And see, this is the exact thing that we're talking about, though. In corporate America, John is not obligated to respond to me. But in the military, if I'm Staff Sergeant Greenberg and John is Sergeant Kirchhoff, he is obligated to respond to me.
Yeah.
Whether he likes it or not, whether regardless of time of day, whatever it may be. If I say, hey, I need you at the company headquarters at midnight, he is obligated to be there.
Yeah. Otherwise he'll be otherwise he's going to end up pulling duty as a staff duty NCO here pretty soon.
And painting rocks.
And painting rocks, maybe raking them as well.
And the other part of that is, if I did that just to mess with him, I'm going to have my own penalty to pay later too.
Yeah.
And that's the way that's one of the differences in the leadership style of the military is we police our own.
Yes.
As a whole, like there's the company grade Article 15, or you go out in the clay for a few hours.
You know, that was something that, so my very first job out of the military, as I said, it was Lowe's, but I was in a management position. I had a team of 15 people. And when I went into that role, there was one guy, and they didn't tell me this when I showed up, but there was one guy that people kept on coming back and reporting to me that he was out in the middle of the aisle staring at his phone, and everybody knew because it was briefed on a regular basis that was something that they weren't supposed to do. Well, I brought him in and I had a conversation with him, and then I sent him back out. Well, I was told by the store manager that day that, well, that was the 5th time that happened with this kid. And I said, well, okay, but this is the first time it's happened since I got here. And she was appalled. It almost looked like she had this look on her face like I just smacked her or something like that. And I said, well, what's going on? What's wrong with that? Well, she's like, we have a specific policy here that if something happens a certain amount of times, you have to fire somebody. And I'm like, well, I just took this job 3 weeks ago. I haven't even had an opportunity to do any remedial training with this kid. I'm not firing this kid. You can talk to my boss because my team didn't actually work. But anyway, you know, she couldn't believe that I wanted to go and take ownership of the professional development of my own people before I just threw people out the door. Apparently, they were really, really, really quick to fire people there. But that was the last time that ever happened with that kid. And it's because I talked to him about it. I gave him a plan of action and I checked in with them multiple times during the day. How often do you go into a job where they tell you who you're going to be firing if they do anything wrong within a certain amount of time when you're in a leadership position? They don't tell you. And so then all of a sudden they throw you off guard and they're telling you all of a sudden that you got to fire somebody. I couldn't believe it.
I think there's an underlying theme here, and I think that's everyone's favorite word to say, but no one's favorite word to own, and that's accountability. Right?
Yeah.
If you look at it, your scenario, you took accountability of him. It was your first time. You were new there. Your first time seeing this offense. You had no historical data. Let's pretend you did. Would that have changed your perception? Maybe, maybe not. Or you may have said, okay, if he's already prone to this, that's already something you would have been looking out for, and you probably would have had that conversation earlier.
Yep.
So
you would have been proactive about it.
Yes, I would have.
Reactive.
Absolutely. Yes.
So again, right, we're going into that accountability piece. Now you have the lady, she's like, well, you need to fire him. It's like, well, how come you didn't fire him? Is it five times? Show me that policy. And how come you weren't enforcing it? And how come you, right?
She couldn't.
Right.
Well, it's where's the paper, going back to what we joked about before is where is the paper trail? Because that's an HR thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I distinctly remember I had an HR complaint against me that was made on behalf of somebody who was not aggrieved.
Trevor had an HR complaint?
No. But what happened was HR was obligated to investigate it.
Yeah.
The person that was the alleged aggrieved party wanted no part of this thing. Like they straight up said there was nothing wrong, but a director overheard what happened secondhand and had to step in by company policy because of their role. And then HR got involved. We did the interviews, everything happened. And I was told by my boss, he was like, hey, who was a retired general, we're having this conversation. The situation is solved. Assume you have now been talked to. I will follow this up with an email that we discussed this. And we moved on. So that's kind of the flip side of what you were talking about how you can hold things accountable, but you also have to realize that there's corporate structures involved where if somebody hears something, they have to report it, whether they have the whole story or not by position title.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it from this lens. So we have 3 different opinions here. So from a veteran's perspective, which we all are, what would we tell a civilian employer based off of the accountability and all the stuff that we just got done talking about? What's an expectation that employer could have when they're potentially bringing on a veteran in a leadership position specifically?
My first instinct is to say, have another veteran mentor them when they walk in the door and help teach them the lay of the land, because we speak our own language, and that that mentor can tell that new manager, hey, you are not wearing rank anymore. I know what that feels like. I've been there. Here's the goes. Here's the no-goes. A lot of think about it, paint a picture of a situation where we had to be on our best behavior and things that were not appropriate, and explain all of that to them. Because if this is a kid, I'm going to say a kid, but somebody that joined the military at 18, gets out at, we'll say mid-30s, maybe didn't retire, gets out in mid-30s, their only experience is the military culture and professional life. And depending on where you go in the military, units, MOSs, all of that, different things are accepted and different things aren't. Better or worse, that's just the way it is. John, would I send you, would that be appropriate to almost anyone else?
Absolutely not.
But to a certain handful of people, I know I've curated my audience to know who I can send very inappropriate things to that will find them just as funny as I do.
Yep.
That's why we only send JJ mildly inappropriate things.
Exactly.
I still don't understand that.
You're the adult in the room.
I'm the adult in the room. Oh my
Because of your
gosh.
prior rank as a warrant officer, you are by default the most adult of the least adults.
If you only knew. We won't go there till after we turn off the live button.
We're trying to
But I do know.
we're just giving you a little bit of credit.
But
There you
that's,
go.
but I think that, but I really do think that is, and I'll speak from personal experience, that is the one thing that really made the difference, because my first job after I left the Auburn Library, I was in a corporate environment, for a small corporate environment, and it was a retail store. Our flagship store was below the corporate offices. Store manager had been there for forever, and he was a retired first sergeant. I think he was a Cav guy. And I found out, military attracts military. And I remember going to him so many times in that first year going, I don't understand. What am I doing wrong? Or what is going on? And he'd look at me and go, here's your problem. And he'd explain it to me, not only as a first sergeant, but as a civilian, to understand. Like, there were times where he was like, you can't expect people to do that much for you. You can't expect them to listen the first time. And this is a guy that was managing a bunch of college kids. So, I mean, he literally went from being a first sergeant to managing college kids all over again.
So he never left the rank.
But the idea
God.
was that I went to him with my problems, and he was able to translate them to understandable language, because we have our own language, we have our own mannerisms, we have our own everything. And if you don't have that filter to translate from military to civilian, you're going to get lost, and you're probably going to end up getting fired.
Yeah. Oh, I think I would tell that employer specifically who is hiring that manager who used to be a military guy. We'll say that same persona that Trevor was talking about, that 35-year-old person who joined at 18 years old, that this is really, unless they worked at a grocery store or something before they joined the military, probably their only professional experience. I would say that do a very good job at explaining the left and right limitations. Let them know that if there's anything outside of that discussion that was had, then they need to come up and talk to them specifically about it and get clarity. Don't go off the rails. I mean, the one thing that we mentioned earlier.
When do you have that conversation?
Say that again.
When do you have that conversation? Prior to
When
the
they
offer?
First,
or
no. When they first get, when they're going through their orientation and they're watching the hours and hours and hours of ridiculous videos that you have to watch whenever you go into an organization for the first time, before you get introduced to your team and you go out there and you do your job, you have that conversation with them. Because if you don't set that expectation right up front, then any guy who served in the military as a leader, whether it's an E5 or an O10, it really doesn't matter. We're gonna run with whatever you give us, and we're gonna make stuff happen.
I would argue that needs to be done during the interview process.
Okay.
Because if you're telling me, we've all been through the interview process for roles, and if you're unsure of what your limits are, and if you're asking as a service member about the role, and you're unclear and you're used to hiring vets, that should be part of the interview process, is explaining all of that to make sure, is this the right fit for you? Because if you say, hey, here are your left and right limits, and you're a retired first sergeant, and you're going to be in charge of 18 and 19-year-old college kids who at a whim decide, I'm sick, I want to go party, I'm coming into work hungover, and that's your every day, and you're a retired first sergeant, not everybody can handle that.
But what if you're a company that is not vet heavy? You don't even know what to say during the interview process. So this is something that's interesting, that I'm trying to speak to the masses, because this is a big issue. Many veterans quit in the first 6 months in their first job after they get out of the military. Yes, it's on us as the veterans. I 100% agree. We need to make sure that we are clearing that company for our demeanor, and we are supposed to be clearing that company for our for what we need to fulfill us as the person who's going to be working in that job and making sure it's the right fit for us. But on the other side of that, I do think that there's a basic understanding that civilian organizations should have for what they're getting. And there are so many questions that you can ask during the interview process. I mean, interviews could go 4, 5, 6 hours if you asked all the questions. But at the end, go ahead.
But I was just going to say that if it's not a vet heavy organization and you're ingrained in the military culture, take that for however you want to interpret it. It's on you then to understand if you're able to adapt to their environment versus them having to adapt to you. Because if you're expecting an organization to adapt to you, you're going to just be broken, burnt out, and quit anyways. So if you're
that's not an expectation.
So if you're not asking the right questions to understand what you need as a vet, then that's on you for failing to vet the company properly, unless there's extenuating circumstances such as I need a job, I need money to pay rent, that kind of thing. Then you make it work as best as you can. But if you've got options, it's on you to make sure that's the right fit. And that's not just for the transitioning service member, that's for anybody.
Yes, I think we all should own our outcomes. I 100% agree. The whole goal of wanting to put this show together, though, is to bridge that communication gap between these civilian organizations and veterans. And so I think that veterans should be doing all their research, I think the transition programs that are out there should be preparing them for what the civilian world has to offer. That's not happening. It is not happening. And so we think that because the company has a culture, maybe the interviewer was funny, maybe that first line supervisor, they said all the right things during the interview process, and then we get there and it's a complete, gosh, well, I'm trying to keep it clean here, but it's what's that?
Donkey show.
Donkey show. Ooh. Anyway.
What? What'd you say, John?
Are we back in Mexico? What just happened?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if that was any more appropriate than what I was going to say, but
it's a show with a donkey in it. Clean your minds, people.
But if we're going to be bridging that gap, then we need to talk about the things that both parties need to understand. And if there's an HR section that's listening to this right now, just know that first of all, you need to go through that SHRM course that gives you that little veteran friendly badge that, I mean, if you're in HR, you should be doing that. It's free.
I have that certificate. So
me too. It's easy. And you know what? Actually, from a very basic level, they tell you what military life is all about. And so you kind of if you go through that, you'll forget it within 6 months, but it does a very good job explaining what our lifestyle was and the culture in the military. Maybe not, I would say that not every type of force. So in this call, we started off talking about conventional versus SOF forces. And I don't know about the SOF forces because I never served in those, so I can't speak to that. But what I will say, basic military life means that nothing is consistent, but we do a very good job at communicating with one another, unless you're talking about the S shops talking with each other and stuff like that. Because that just does not happen. And if you ever served, you know what the S shops are. If you didn't serve, I will say HR versus operations versus safety versus all of the things. So the left hand doesn't talk to the right. It doesn't matter what organization you're a part of. But I do think that when it comes to the type of demographics that you're hiring for, you need to have a very basic understanding of what they bring to the table and the differences in those cultures, so that you're not bringing somebody in that's going to leave in 6 months, and you can at least mitigate some of that.
I got one question that anyone can ask as an interviewee, right? If you're being interviewed for no matter what role, what duty, what position, veteran or not, here's the one question that's going to tell you if you're going to the right area. And this is going to make a lot of HR people very uncomfortable.
Uh-oh.
What is your onboarding process?
Oh, yeah.
I was expecting, do you offer pizza Fridays?
Yeah. Do you guys have pizza parties? But no, listen, this is where most organizations across the board fail. But this is also what makes the military, especially the SF community, very, very strong. It is that onboarding process, right? So, when I talked earlier about me going to selection twice and then getting peered out in less than 3 weeks because of their onboarding process and what they expect and the expectations. So when you see good organizations, you ask that, what is your onboarding process, right? They're going to tell you what it is. Like, this is the detail. This is how long it takes. This is what you're going to learn. This is what you're going to get. This is the expectation we're going to put on you. Less than substandard companies are going to be like, oh yeah, you do a week of this kind of orientation thing. We're going to hand you your handbook of how to succeed here. Some places will hand you a tool bag, and then
you read it, you sign it.
OJT, yeah, and it's like, right now you got that level of expectation. Now you know what to expect. And maybe you are that type who can fluctuate with perfect. Yeah, loosey-goosey, just sort of hand me this book and hand me this and let me go. That may be your jam.
Yeah.
You may be a person who needs that like structure. No, I need to know everything and I need to do certain things. Again, that's for you to figure out as the interviewee, like, hey, is this going to be right for me? Because that gives you that kind of that dipping your toe in the water. Is it warm enough for you to jump in?
John, I'm gonna push back on that question a little bit though. And who do you ask that to? Do you ask that to HR or do you ask that to the functional manager?
You ask it in the interview. Because it doesn't matter who's interviewing you, they went through an orientation.
Well, but I ask that because HR could say, we have this policy. But if you ask your functional manager, he may have a completely different story because he doesn't even know the HR policy. He or she doesn't even know the HR policy.
But it's not about knowing the policy.
It's
what is the onboarding process? And I guarantee you that person who's interviewing you is going to just remember, what did they do? Oh yeah, I watched 3 videos from 1983. One was on VHS still. I didn't know we had one that worked still. And you're going to be like, oh, okay, right? Versus you may get to a place and they're like, hey, this first week, you're going to be in this classroom at the headquarters. You're going to be learning this, doing this. Then we're going to walk you around the floor or this building or this cubicle farm, and you're going to meet these people and talk, right? Again, individual results may vary, but that's going to tell you where they are at and whether that's the kind of environment you can operate in.
Yeah. And if they don't know, that's an even bigger red flag.
And that's a, hey, or we just want you to sign the job offer letter and show up tomorrow.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
What do you mean an onboarding process? Do you know how to pick up a shovel?
Onboarding? What is this word you speak of?
Sounds more like on boring.
Chlorophyll, more like borophyll.
No. So, I mean, this is a great conversation because we need to bridge this gap. Now, we'll put a survey out probably this month because we don't actually have a topic set up for next month yet. And that's just full transparency. So what I would challenge everybody to do, whether you're watching this now or watching it in the future, is to leave a comment below. If you've struggled through transition, which if you've served, I guarantee that there's been something that you struggle with. We want to know about it. If you need clarification on the process of trying to get a job, if you need clarification on trying to figure out, what resources are out there for you, if you need clarification on, if you're a civilian employer, if you need clarification on certain topics relating to hiring a veteran, it doesn't really matter what it is. Based off of this show, we are trying to bridge the communication gap between veterans who are going out into the civilian world and a civilian world that would like to know more about the type of experiences that veterans have and what the benefits are for bringing them into their organization. And instead of having those conversations where civilians look at us like we're having something funny dangling from our forehead or whatever the case may be, we'd like to have those conversations non-judgmental and productive. So let us know. Leave a comment below. Send this to somebody who you think might actually have some insight to something like this. And let's grow this idea, not just this show, but this idea, so more people are having these conversations. Yeah. Anything else from either of you two?
No.
If you need to know what the donkey show is, please email Trevor at trevor.greenberg.nottoday@aol.com.
Yeah, don't ask me. I don't want to tell you.
It's an innocent show. There's nothing wrong with the donkey show in the U.S. It is a donkey being paraded around and just laughed at.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong
Wait
with
a
the
second.
donkey.
When did we
Usually-
start parading the Marines around?
They're
I had to
pulling the
project
cart.
that. I had to
The
project
donkeys the donkeys we're talking about are the ones that started off the U.S. Army Transportation Corps, and they were delivering goods from the train to the fob.
Very, very generic, relatable statement there. Everybody got that.
I don't want to say what a donkey show is.
But
anyway,
it's called basic military training. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
find it at any of your local training camps.
I think that's a circus.
John led it.
You know what? And John was a drill sergeant, so he knows.
Well, that was the point. Thank you for stating thank you, Captain Obvious.
Ta-da!
Or should I say Chief Obvious?
Okay.
Chief Warrant Officer.
Chief Warrant Officer. Yes. Well, unless anybody else has any closing comments, we can go ahead and close this out and continue on, and we'll put a notification out when we decide what our next topic is.
Yeah, and we'll actually put one out this time. This was kind of this one crept up on us.
It did.
It
did.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, guests and all that other. I mean, we went back and forth a couple times on a couple different things. So yeah, this one we would like to make more concrete, and this is a new show. This is what our third one that we've done so far. So we want to make this relatable to you guys, not just the three of us. I mean, even though we enjoy having conversations, yeah, we're just going to end up jaw jacking. We'll show up once a month and jaw jack if nobody sends us anything. So send us a topic that could actually be useful.
I mean, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So look at me.
I mean, listen, if we don't get any ideas for a show, next episode will be, does this look like a rash? And we will talk about the medical profession.
Or maybe we'll talk about donkey shows.
I'm busy. Whatever day it is. For both of those topics, I've got other plans.
All right. Well, again, make sure you leave a comment below. Tell us what you guys want to talk about. And other than that, we'll see you all next time.
See you guys.
See you guys.